Where are your decks? This is a VR for tarot and oracle people, whether you're a deck collector or just have a few. The topic of this VR is talking about where you keep your decks, use your decks, store your decks, organize your decks, and maybe learning a little bit from each other about our practices. I was thinking of doing a video about this, and then I realized it would be a good VR. This topic is particularly of interest to me because I work with neurodivergent folks, and the fact is that there can be a lot of hurdles and challenges and things around knowing where our decks are, actually using them in practice, etc., where storage and organization is actually a topic that I'm really interested in. If you're new here, hi, my name is Avery, and I help neurodivergent and nerdy humans who are justice aligned to cultivate ease and self-trust for growing into our emerging future. So the questions for this VR, I'm going to read them out and then I will do my own answers, but they are as follows. Question 1, where do you keep your tarot and oracle decks? So where do you store them? Where do they sit? Question number 2, do you rotate decks, keep certain decks out? How are you using decks in practice? So like, where do you read, and are you keeping decks out, or are you grabbing them from storage all the time? Do you have like certain decks out for certain seasons, for example? Question number 3 is, do you carry decks on the go? Do you use them outside? Do you use them when you travel? Are they in your car? Or are they pretty much, I use them all in one place? Question 4, do you have any favorite tools for storage of decks, for transport of decks, for having cards out? Any nifty tools you want to show us that you've found worked? I know a lot of folks in the community have cool DIY ways of doing this. And then number 5, how has the way you organize, store, and rotate your decks, if you do, facilitated your practice or not? So, has the way you've done this evolved over time? What have you learned that might be interesting for us to reflect on? So those are the questions. You can answer this with the hashtag #WhereAreYourDecks on YouTube, or if you don't have a YouTube channel, you can answer in the comments. You can do this on social media if you want. I'm not on social media, so I won't necessarily personally see it, but you can do that if you like. And I'll check the hashtag on YouTube for VRs to this. If you just want to mention my name, that'd be cool. Help folks find out about this channel. But I'm going to go ahead and answer the questions myself. So the first one is, where do you keep your tarot and oracle decks? So for the most part, right here. This is my shelves. So I have a set of, these are just wire shelves that you can get wherever. They're like, they might be called CD or DVD style shelves. You can see that they're pretty narrow, that they're about the size for most decks. Some of the bigger boxes don't do great here, but that's what I do. And then I also have, if you can see down, the very bottom shelf is where I keep guidebooks. So that's my system. You can see I've got little labels here, kind of similar to how you might see at Blockbuster back in the day, little plastic labels. And so I have organized mine. You can see I have a pretty large collection. I'm actually trying to cull it down some. Some are in bags, some are in boxes, but I have organized mine currently. It's by sort of theme, and I try to keep similar decks together, and tarot and oracle are all mixed up. So that's how I do mine. I also have digitally, though, I do it in Notion, but you can think of it as equivalent to a spreadsheet. So I have a Notion database that lists everything that I have, and it describes what it's in, so that if I can't remember like what the heck bag is this deck in, I can find the color that I describe. And I don't think I could do it this way without some sort of reference that helped me to remember, like, what category did I put that deck in? But that's where most of my decks live. And then I can show you as well, there's a little thing. Oh, can you see it? I can't see what I'm showing you, which is probably not the best way to do this. But you can kind of see there's a couple decks right there on this little hutch that I have on my desk. So I keep at hand the Fuzzy Prism and the Muse Tarot. And the reason is that this one is specifically for my Venus practice. And then the fuzzy prism I keep out because it's just a really like accessible, quick grab oracle. So that's a second place. And then the last place is kind of an answer to the next question. So the second question is whether you rotate your decks or keep certain decks out. So this has just changed. I just reset this again, set this up after having some stuff done in our house, and I had to take every deck off and put it in bins. So I'm not currently doing this, but up until very recently, I was actually leaving probably 5 to 10 decks each month. Part of my practice for the month was that I would intuitively pull out decks I wanted to use. And what I found is that I never use those decks. So the location is over here. I'll show you. I have a coffee table. Whoop. And you can see there's actually some cards out on it right now. So what I had been doing was I had been laying a bunch of decks on the kind of top bit of this coffee table. And so I had like 5 or 6 seasonal decks. I also had like a couple decks I wanted out for study. I had a deck I do a particular practice with. What I found for me personally is that I thought like that was new for me about a year ago. And I thought, oh, it's gonna be great. I'm gonna use decks more. I'm gonna remember they're there. I did not. It was like anytime I wanted to read, then I would go there, but I didn't naturally want to read that much. And it did not change that, having decks out. The other location that's relevant to my practice is this other desk. So this is my like tarot desk. And normally the ones that are out on the coffee table, normally I actually do leave a space here for having a spread that's just out. So for me, I do my weekly practice on that table. And so I like having, this is a real luxury for me, I didn't have this before. I like having a space where I can actually leave a reading out just sitting like for a while. And so that's what's on the coffee table now is my weekly reading. And that way throughout the week I can reference it and just look at it. I'm not keeping, well, I have 2 oracle decks over there. I'm not mostly keeping decks over there, but I do have the archetypes, the Wild Unknown Archetypes deck, because I pull a card every month, and I put it on my altar, which is the top of that desk. And then I have 2 affirmation decks, because often for my altar I might want an affirmation style oracle card, so I do have 2 decks that live over there. But yeah, so that's the first and the second question for me. So I'm going to move away from rotating decks out and just try to make myself use the decks that are sitting there. I do have in my database, though, I have tagged the ones. So I have like the status, and some of them the status is like unfamiliar. Basically, I have not met the deck, I haven't worked with it yet. So that's a good place for me to just check and be like, oh, what decks do I want to start working with as well. So number 3, do I carry decks on the go, use them outside, etc.? Not really. I keep theoretically thinking, oh, it would be beautiful to use decks outside and things, and it always freaks me out because I'm afraid they'll blow away. I'm afraid things will happen to them. So I don't really use anything outside. When I travel, though, I will often take a deck or more with me, depending on how long the trip is. I've been very locked down, so I don't really have a like other outside life. But for example, I was just in North Carolina for 3 months, and I brought 5 decks with me. And it was really nice. It was really nice, like, just having a few decks. But I get nervous, so I only usually travel with ones that I know I could replace. That's just me. So number 4, favorite tools for storage or transport. So I do think these shelves are a nice little hack if you have a big collection, just because they're not as expensive as a bookshelf that large, and they're very narrow, but for a tarot deck, like, that works fine. I do like having bags. Personally, I kind of prefer the zipper ones, but the drawstring, another nifty tool that I don't currently use, but this is what I did at my last place, is I had a shoe rack. You know, like the wire shoe racks? I had a shoe rack, and then I would use the drawstring bags, and I could hang decks from where you would put shoes. So that worked great. You can have about 30 decks on the back of your door. So if that is something that you would, find useful, not having to like put pegs in your wall, you can actually use a shoe rack for storage. So that's kind of a neat tool. The other favorite tool I have that I got recently, and this is back to like the altar space, is you can just find these on Etsy. I think I did get this on Etsy. I'm gonna give you some light. Is that. So I got a little holder so you can put about 3 cards upright. You can get ones for single. This one you put like crystals in the little spaces for the triple moon. But I like having something like that just because I often like to have kind of a reference, cards up for reference. If there's particular energy I'm going through, I might just find the card in my deck and put it up, even if it wasn't a pull. Or I might do a pull and I want to just like leave a card up for a while. So besides having the like altar cloth in the space where I could leave a whole spread out, I also like having that little holder. And you can see since I mentioned it. Also, yeah, so I have these couple of oracle decks and the archetypes. I also keep, so this is, I don't use the Alleyman's Tarot, but it has a lot of cards that I don't use, so they're useful for the altar, because if I need a specific card, there's probably one in there that I wouldn't mind using. And then if I get like random spare cards that come, with a Kickstarter or something, I also have this little like thing of, this is not cards, but a lot of those are postcards that come with a Kickstarter. So having a bunch of imagery I can put on my altar if I want a particular card is really handy. The question number 5 about how things have evolved. For me, yeah, it's definitely changed. I think the main thing that has evolved and changed over time that I've learned about is how I organize those shelves. And it wasn't always those shelves, but when I lived on the East Coast, it was bookshelves for the ones that are in boxes, and then the shoe rack trick. And then I came out here and I was like, I just want like one big thing. So, and I have a rule for myself, and this is really useful. It's not currently being followed. You may be able to tell there are decks on top of decks, but I'm trying to get it so that every deck fits in here with no stacking. So when it's not like that, I know it's time for me to sell things. So having a space where like that kind of helps like how many decks you want to have at one time and when we've gotten out of control is kind of useful. I've organized this in different ways. I've tried before doing it where it's like all tarot, all oracle. I've tried doing alphabetical. I tried doing at one point, I had this whole thing where I would, when I did deck interviews, I would like ask it questions about what the deck was for, and I would organize based on what the deck said it was for, but it had nothing to do with like the imagery or anything. And although that was in theory an interesting idea, like if a bright cheerful deck told me it was a shadow deck, I would go with it. It made it really hard to find a deck that I was specifically looking for. So for me, organization kind of is twofold. It's like, one is having a way to find categories. So like finding a tarot and an oracle that might like go play really nice together. Having like a way to find the decks, for example, that you want to be working with more, or maybe having seasonal decks. That's one purpose it can serve, but the other purpose that it can serve is being able to find the specific deck you're looking for at the specific time. And if you do have a large collection, that can be tough. So the alphabetical way works for that, but I had to remember the names of decks, which was not always easy. So I just found that this category way kind of meets both purposes. Sometimes I will try to do the oracles to one side and the tarot to another, but I've kind of gotten to the point where I don't really do that. I mostly I will group similar like decks by the same creator, because often I want to use them together. So that's sort of that. And like I said, I just learned that for me, keeping out, I know it's a practice a lot of people do that works well for them, but having like the decks I'm using this month doesn't really make me read more. What I do like is using the decks that I'm not as familiar with, that I'm trying to decide whether I want to keep. Those ones I will use for the weekly practice, because it means, especially if I'm also pulling daily cards, it means I'm seeing those images a lot and getting a chance to work with them actively. So that's what works well for me. Anyway, I'll leave the questions in the description as well, but hashtag where are your decks. I would love to hear where are your decks and how you organize and store and keep and use your cards and how that influences your practice is really interesting to me. So thanks for watching this VR and for responding if you do, and we'll see you in the next video.